Square Enix literally just announced that we will be receiving a new free story update for Final Fantasy XV as part of September's patch update, but now they've gone one step further by announcing that they are planning to continue working on updates to the game's story throughout 2018. The news comes via the Tokyo Game Show Active Time Report, where Hajime Tabata, the game's director, was speaking about a ton of different topics, some of which we'll talk about a bit later. But the main point we're going to focus on right now though is related to the future of Final Fantasy XV and how they've decided to change their plans for additional content almost entirely. As was reported by DualShockers earlier this year during an exclusive interview with Tabata, the team working on Final Fantasy XV had originally planned to have a year's worth of free and paid content, and that large-scale support for the game would effectively end with the release of episode Ignace. But that's no longer the case, as Hajime Tabata has now confirmed that they will be supporting Final Fantasy XV after the release of episode Ignace in December. This idea was actually floated by Tabata back in August 2016. When speaking to Famitsu, he suggested that if Final Fantasy XV performed well, that they would be open to the possibility of working on a second season pass for Final Fantasy XV, or at least providing additional paid content. He explained that the 6 pieces of content that they had announced within the season pass weren't everything they had planned from the perspective of downloadable content, and that if they did decide to make content outside of the season pass, then it would likely require additional purchases. He did note though that there was a lot about the game's roadmap that wasn't clear to them at that point, which is somewhat understandable as the game wasn't even out yet. But if we fast forward to now and the recent Active Time report, Tabata said that they have changed their plans around future development because of such a strong demand from the fans. He said they've been asking for Final Fantasy XV to continue with the hope that the developers will be able to enrich the story further. According to Siliconera, Tabata said that the story-related content that they're going to be working on will be designed to fill any holes that are left within the plot. They're aiming to make Final Fantasy XV 100% complete from a story perspective. They're reporting that Tabata said, "It won't only be about digging further into characters through additional episodes, but we must show more for the setting of the world that is its base in order to better depict how its characters are living." In my opinion, this can only be seen as very positive news. The story of Final Fantasy XV and its delivery in particular has been a huge gripe of mine, but it's also pretty clear that the same feelings resonate throughout the community. I mean, you don't have to dig too deep either. Even when looking at comments from the last video we published relating to the September story update, it's clear that people want the story expanded above anything else they can produce right now. It's a notion that was also rather prevalent in the Final Fantasy XV community survey that we conducted back in July. Not only was the game's story one of the lowest rated aspects, no matter how we splice the data up, but when asked what one thing they would improve about Final Fantasy XV above all else, 50% of respondents who had played at least one other Final Fantasy game before said they would improve the delivery of the scenario, while a further 15% said they would just improve the base story completely. And if you do Google searches around this particular theme, it's also rather telling. Even so long after release, the top 2 common searches around the story are that people think it's bad and also that it's a mess. At this point though, we of course have no idea whatsoever how they are looking to improve the story of Final Fantasy XV, either via September's update or throughout next year. Next month's update, for example, has teased content relating to Gentiana, Lunafreya, Shiva and Ifrit, and in the Active Time report, Tabata did confirm that the update would relate to the Astrals. However, at this point in time, it's just pure speculation as to what new information will be revealed relating to those 4 characters. Could we learn more about the past of Ifrit and Shiva and perhaps the other Astrals? Or will we learn more about Lunafreya's motivations? It's all up for debate at this point. For all we know, it may just be smaller cutscenes too, like we saw with Chapter 13 Verse 2, or it could be something way more substantial as they've had quite a bit of time to work on it. One thing that Tabata did let slip though, is that there will be a connection between September's story update and episode Ignace. The other known variables relating to Final Fantasy XV's future story are of course Comrades, the multiplayer expansion, and episode Ignace. Comrades is set to have a much stronger emphasis on story than perhaps people anticipated when it was first announced, and Tabata actually admitted in a recent interview with the GameSpot that it's now much more ambitious than they had ever originally intended it to be. He said that while they always planned to create some form of multiplayer expansion when they announced the contents of the Season Pass, it's only when they started thinking about the actual multiplayer and how it would work that it became bigger than they had initially anticipated. One example of this is the character customization. I'm sure you guys all remember, but in a lengthy post on the Square Enix blog shortly after the release of Final Fantasy XV, Tabata revealed they were looking into the possibility of adding customizable avatars. It clearly wasn't in the original plan, but they felt as though there was demand for it, and from everything we've seen, they were absolutely right. Now, from a story perspective, Comrades takes place during Chapter 13 and 14 of the main campaign, so part of its job is to fill in some of the blanks that have arisen from the 10 years that are effectively missing from the main story. You will take on the role of a member of the Kingsglaive who managed to survive, but Tabata confirmed via a question and answer session from some fans at Gamescom that characters like Demon Slayer Iris will be likely to appear as the story progresses throughout Comrades. With regards to episode Ignace, they have also revealed the guest character, which has been rather well received from what I've seen, and we've known for a few months now when the narrative will actually take place in the story. And in the grand scheme of things, episode Ignace acts as something of a swan song for Final Fantasy XV Season Pass, and this, along with the general theme of the content expansion, should help in a significant way. It was revealed earlier this year that they had originally planned to have episode Ignace released ahead of episode Prompto, but they changed things around as they felt episode Ignace would have a much larger impact on the overall story of Final Fantasy XV. They also wanted to have more time to create a solid experience, and as Tabata explained to DualShockers, they wanted to save the best piece of content for last. This topic was actually spoken about in the recent Active Time report, as Tabata noted that in order to ensure the content was as good as it possibly could be, they have had an exclusive team working hard to develop episode Ignace. The main message they want to convey on this front though is that they've heard the fans loud and clear through attending different events, monitoring the community, and also the official survey they conducted. Via these mediums, they feel it's clear that there's a huge demand for an expanded story, but also that fans just want the Final Fantasy XV experience to continue in general. It's why they are therefore now committed to continue working on the game, so that they can further develop the story and fill the missing gaps in. Tabata did stress though, as he has done on numerous occasions, that there are no plans for a sequel to Final Fantasy XV. They just want to make sure that as a base product, it delivers what fans want. This means better backstories for characters, better character development, and better development for the world and its associated lore. But this wasn't a small decision, especially as Tabata's Business Division 2 have already started work on their next game, which is planned to be a completely new IP. There are milestones in place against that particular project, and Tabata even talked about it recently when he spoke with Fandom, when he confirmed that their next project wouldn't be Final Fantasy Type 1. Due to their commitments on this new IP, they therefore had to think long and hard about how they could actually work on two projects simultaneously without affecting timings that had been committed to the business. Their solution was to completely restructure the entire development team. Such was their desire to deliver a definitive Final Fantasy XV experience for fans, while still pursuing innovation in their next project. I mean, really, you have to commend them. They could easily have said, you know what, we're done with Final Fantasy XV. It didn't work out the way we intended, and we just want to start afresh with something else to show everyone what we can actually do. But to their credit, they've said, no, we want to give back to our fans. They have now committed to trying to finish what they started and ensure that Final Fantasy XV delivers on what they initially intended. Sure, it's disappointing that all this content couldn't have been there in the beginning when the game launched, and there will of course be those who call them out for this, but I'd like to stress again, they didn't have to do this. I do want to say though, at this point there's no notion of whether the content they produce next year will be paid or free. I mean, it would be great if they could deliver plenty of free story updates to bolster the main narrative with paid content to supplement things outside of that, but I'm not sure we're in a position to be picky as none of this was actually planned to begin with. But either way, as I said before, this wasn't the only thing discussed in the Active Time report, so let's take a look at what else they ran through, starting with further expansions to the Final Fantasy XV universe. Now, even though Monsters of the Deep hasn't released yet, Tabata confirmed that they already have plans for their next VR experience. He talked about how they had originally intended to have a more action-orientated VR game, but after revealing the Final Fantasy XV VR experience at E3 2016, which of course featured Prompto, but they realised it would be way too difficult to develop that type of game, and they therefore settled with Monsters of the Deep as something of a compromise. They felt it would allow them to develop something that players could enjoy, but in a much simpler manner. Kazuya Takahashi, who's the director of Comrades, also popped in to talk in more detail about how you can enjoy the multiplayer expansion. One of the first things he spoke about is that while it is indeed billed as a multiplayer expansion, it will also have a single player component. If you choose the multiplayer route, you will be able to undertake missions with other members of the Kingsglaive, who can either be real people from around the world or bots. However, should you choose to go the single player route, you will get a slightly different experience. Quests relating to the single player will instead be based around the city of Lestalem, and it's said they will play out more like a traditional RPG experience. In terms of Comrades as a whole, mechanic extraordinaire Sid Sophia, who's based in Lestalem during this time period, will be on hand to customize weapons in various ways, and you'll be able to appoint refugees into different roles within the city. It's said that some of these refugees might even be familiar to you, implying that you will get to meet some friendly faces from your main playthrough of the game. And it was also mentioned that this may well be the last active time report that they end up broadcasting, but Tabata did say there are plans in place for how the team will communicate with fans in the future. Now, I know that active time reports have had their ups and downs over the years, and towards the end of 2015 they were getting rather incessant due to not only their frequency, but also the mess they created within the fanbase, because it just seemed like there was no real planning. But I'm kinda gonna miss them. We'll just have to see what they have in store for us. For now though, I'm still somewhat shocked to this news, but I guess it's not all that surprising in some respects. They have clearly invested a lot in Final Fantasy 15 and its associated universe, so having the main game continue into next year will help support all of this. I just genuinely didn't expect them to carry on with it, at least with this level of commitment. As with the September update though, I'm just curious as to how committed they're actually going to be to fix the story in terms of depth. We already know from the survey results that an expansion to Arden's story was the most requested piece of scenario content, but Tabata also spoke about further expansion around what Lunafreya was doing for large parts of the story. These areas could well see full-on paid episodes, like we've seen with episode Gladiolus, Prompto and Ignace, but I guess we'll just have to wait and see. They've alluded to the fact that they'd share some sort of roadmap towards the end of the year. Either way, how do you guys feel about this news? I saw a lot of excitement regarding the September update, but it'll be interesting to see if you guys are equally excited about the prospect of up to another year of Final Fantasy 15 story content. As always, let us know in the comments below, and if you enjoyed this video, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. As a heads up, I'm currently working on a video for one of our Patreon supporters, which looks into how opinions have changed towards different Final Fantasy games over time. It's actually turning out to be rather interesting, so be sure to subscribe so you get notified when it's published. And if you'd like to become a Patreon supporter and to help this channel grow and enable us to keep making content for you guys, please head over to our Patreon at patreon.com/FFunion. View our mighty wall of supporters before you. If you pledge even on the lowest tier, you'll get your name featured here alongside these legendary souls, and you'll also get access to an awesome giveaway that we have planned for the near future. Alright guys, that's enough from me now. This is Daryl signing out. I'll see you next time for more Final Fantasy videos.